Let's see, is that working? Fun times. Checking. Awesome. Give it a couple more minutes. So quieter morning, I guess. I did do it earlier than yesterday's, so that could be part of it. Yeah. Yeah. It's okay. Gives me a chance to set up the live stream a bit better. So I did help see. I forget to turn my volume down. So. It's like there's like a 10 or 15-second delay. So. Oh no, you're all good. It was me talking to me. It was us talking that it picked up. So. So we do just a better version of this. That's all. I'm going to be obnoxious here in a few minutes. Starting a workshop and I said I'd live stream it. So even if there's no one here, I'm going to be doing a developing interesting characters for D&D and tabletop gaming workshop. So I'm sorry if it's just some random guy talking about something you don't care about. But if that is something you care about, you're welcome to come join over here and play. Or just listen and enjoy the ambiance and timbre of my voice. That's always pleasant, right? But maybe not. But that'll be in just a few minutes. So fair warning. Fair warning. I have permission to be loud in the library, just saying. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is the Developing Interesting Characters workshop. It is beneficial for a variety of contexts that you might have to develop interesting characters, whether that's tabletop gaming, which is the primary thing that I do because I am the D&D club advisor, which is always good to start, I guess, with introductions. But my name is Greg. I teach writing, mythology, technical writing here on campus, and I'm the D&D club advisor that meets 2 days a week. Mondays and Thursdays in the evenings, and usually has anywhere from 15 to 30 students, somewhere between 3 and 5 tables. With that, there are benefits to developing interesting characters and being able to play them in a game. But developing interesting characters also works if you are doing any other sort of story development, whether that's for narrative and game design, whether that's developing your own comic books, kids books, telling a memoir or family story, doing a biography of a famous person, or just trying to suss out the idiosyncrasies of people throughout history or current politicians. Thinking, using some of the strategies I'll give you for developing characters can also help you kind of reverse engineer the people in your everyday lives or people on out in the interwebs, online, or who are public figures or have been in history. I like to use the hat model to describe the core process for developing an interesting character. The hat model is based on the metaphor that we are wearing when we role play. We wear different hats, so you can switch between hats if you're changing characters. So if you're an individual player, you only have to wear the one hat. If you are running a game, you are constantly swapping hats. So having the belief systems, mindsets of a particular character and being able to swap, that can be really useful. With the hat model, we start with, not because I'm negative or anything, but because it makes for a good acronym. You can do these in any order, but you start with, what does this character hate? If this character hates a thing, I hate hot dogs, something like that. I hate charbroiled lizard found in a marketplace in a fantasy world, or something along those lines, or a particular anything. It could be food, it could be a practice, but what do they hate? So that's the first question to ask yourself if you're developing a character, is what do they hate and who do they hate? And that seems like an extreme thing to say, but when you're trying to figure out what really bothers people, that matters. A lot of people will go along to get along until that one thing is triggered. So if you're thinking about using this to develop a character that actually will respond to something in a game, it's good to know what they will respond to strongly. Since role play tends to be a form of entertainment, and characters are usually in situations that are larger than life anyways, it is the drama of the situation that we draw out. So knowing things that will cause them to respond is why we start with these things. The short version is the hat model goes, what do we hate, what do we adore, and who do we trust? That's the quick HAT. So working through these different pieces can help us think through how people will respond, what will cause them to be extremely positive in a situation or extremely negative in a situation. But we want to see what is something that will make a player playing that character give them something to be responsive to. And so we start with what does my character hate, and the why is important there. What's the rationale for hating it? Is it a bad experience as a childhood? It's like when someone says they don't like chocolate. I have no frame of reference for someone who says they hate chocolate, but then usually it's followed up by a story where as a kid they ate as much chocolate as they possibly could, and now they hate it. And so there's a reasoning. And we usually have reasonings for our beliefs. In rhetoric, they call it a warrant. If we're using a Toolman model, but that's just a bonus thing. That's not the toolbox we're looking at today. Who does my character hate? Who does my character hate, and why matters. Not that we're encouraging hate, but at some point, if each person's honest, they'll say there's something, whether it's a specific person or a thing about a person that they really don't like the person doing, even if you just call it a pet peeve. So we're using strong language. Again, because we're trying to see what is this person going to respond to? What will be enough that someone will not just go along to get along in any particular situation? Because that is what can make for really interesting role play. And that is also, in nonfiction context, a great way to see what gets someone going, causes them to be motivated to move. So if we're doing rhetorical studies, we might call this these beliefs and things, we might anchor to exigence or exigency. What's enough to get them pushed to do something, to communicate, to advocate for some other thing? And so we ask that question, what does my character hate and why? And who does my character hate and why? And so now would be a great time to make that up for your character. So you can write that on your sheets. If you're watching online, take a moment and answer these questions on the screen and see what comes up. There's not a wrong answer to this, and it could be completely random. You don't actually have to have a good reason for choosing these things. But as you try and choose anything, it gives you something to respond to. It doesn't have to be things you hate. You like chocolate. Anything that deals with dessert. Very sad. So take a moment, write those things down. Someone somewhere is writing, I really hate when people talk in quiet in places that are designated quiet. That's on there somewhere for someone else. Unless it's what? Yeah, where it's like you're not even talking to someone. So the next part of the developing interesting characters, if you've decided as part of that hat of your role play, what does my character hate? You next want to say, what do they adore? What's the thing? It could be puppies. Who do they adore? Are there people? Do they have celebrity crushes in a fantasy world? This could be everything from a famous dragon to a king or queen to the random bellhop in their area. It could be a bard that swings through, plays a few songs, and that's the celebrity. But we want to think through what does my character adore? What are the things they really love? What are the things that get them excited about life? And so it's not uncommon if people don't choose these meaningfully for their characters, they just choose money. And that's why we get a lot in tabletop gaming. It's not uncommon for people to want to go find loot, find treasure, and that becomes a really boring motivation long term. It's like, well, yeah, okay, we're going to find money. We can get that a lot of different ways. We can look for gold, we can find magic items, and if that is part of your character's thing that they love to have, it may be that also sets up a promise. So if you have something that you early in a game or in a story introduce as something someone hates or adores, but it doesn't really have a lot of substance, part of the promise and in that storytelling, even as we're doing a tabletop game or we're doing this collaboratively, there's a promise with your character that if this belief or this thing they hate or this thing they love is a little bit shallow, we might have this promise that they will grow from there into valuing something better. And so even if you do choose that your character adores money, say the why of that, and then recognize it's a very nice place for potential to promise that this character will grow from that less substantial thing that they love. So in the hat model, we start with what does this character hate, who do they hate and why? Then we go to what are the things they adore and why do they adore them? Who are the people they adore? Why do they adore them? These two things help us create tension and create bonds with other people in the party, since D&D and other tabletop gaming is collaborative storytelling. Hi. Are you presenting? I said I'd live stream, so even though there was no one officially in the chairs, I went ahead and did my thing.
Okay.
What do you got?
Oh
yeah, go for it.
Sorry?
No, you're good. Just want to make sure I didn't even stop. So, in the hat model for developing characters, interesting characters for role play, we have what do I hate? Who do I hate as a character? Who do I adore, or what do I adore as a character? And then finally, who does my character trust? When we look at putting on a hat and role-playing this specific character, those things are meaningful things before we get into any particular system or any particular story, because those things help set up promises in the narrative, whether it's for tabletop gaming or whether it's for kids book or a movie's screenplay or stage play. Anytime we have to develop characters, thinking about what they hate, what they adore, and then who they trust, these will give us the meat of how that character will respond in the world. So we have to have those before we can really get moving with anything connected to tabletop gaming, because those establish the core of the person, and the rest is kind of adding flavor based on whatever fantasy world or science fiction world or game system you're in. So if you think about who your character hates, and what your character adores, and who your character trusts, again, that anchors to relationships they're willing to have, tensions in the story that can create meaningful, dramatic moments of character development. And that's just the starter. So then we start getting into, well, if these are the inner core of my character, before we get into D&D character classes or race and species type decisions, we can, or as we get into those sorts of questions, we can say, okay, what does my character look like? Because as we role play, sometimes that will change the way that that character interacts in a world. And in other workshops we have later in the week, I will talk more about how to engage in complex social issues as part of role play. But there are meaningful story moments that can happen around the table that do engage with social justice issues, challenges of identity and representation. And there are ways to do that well and ways to do that poorly in tabletop gaming and other stories and movies. So as you think about what your character, how your character wants to physically present, do they have any core features? Is the world that you're setting them in, is there anything that would make them have a lower role in that society or a higher role? And that could be everything from socioeconomic status. It could be, one person was in here yesterday who developed a world where dragonborn people, which are scaled dragon-looking people who don't have wings, they tried to bring back a dragon god to the expense of other people around them, and started stealing everybody else's belongings and stealing people. And so the setting they were opening up was 100 years after Dragonborn caused a major social and political issue. So then 3 of their players, not knowing that, decided to play Dragonborn, and 1 decided to play an elf. So now that collaborative storytelling environment had 3 people who were seen as kind of the dark side of society and weren't allowed to speak their language, Draconic, because it reminded the rest of society about all the bad things their people had done in the past. So that's just an example from someone else who was present in a game who did some world building in the workshops yesterday. But these are the kinds of things that when you're thinking about who your character is, we can make meaningful role play, and we can get into some really meaningful tensions and discussions around the table in a slightly softer environment, because it is one step removed identity-wise. So we can handle and engage with meaningful character beliefs and representations of identity through Dragonborn or Goblin folk, instead of where we might see racism or other things show up in everyday society. So sometimes, and I'll talk about this in my workshop later, sometimes games like this in fantasy and science fiction can give us a little bit of a distancing that allows us to actually engage with topics we can't do in everyday life. So when you're thinking about your character's beliefs, who do they hate, what do they hate, why do they hate, and that's again, strong language, but who do they adore, why do they adore? We're trying to get to dramatic moments for the characters, and who do they trust? All those are going to play into the setting. When we think about what our character looks like, we can just have fun with it. It could be that if I'm using the D&D system specifically and I like Pokemon, I could be inspired from anywhere. Pokemon's just an option. So if anyone's seen like this 1st or 2nd season of the original Pokemon series, Indigo League, I believe, Charmander is a sassy teenager. So if I wanted to make Charmander, there are people groups in D&D that are called Genasi, and they can be made of fire elementals. So then you say that one of the parents was a fire Genasi, another was a Dragonborn, and now we have a Charmander teenager, who is a dragonborn fire elemental person with some sass. So we can draw on that and then start working that into our character design and development. And then we have the next fun thing beyond that. It's, what does my character sound like? I did a whole workshop tying to linguistics yesterday as far as how we vocalize characters. But as we're trying to think through character, the way they project, the way they vocalize can be really important. If they're people who they're generally timid, but we trigger one of the things that they hate, adore, or trust, well, maybe they get really bold. And so how they vocalize that difference or physicalize that difference, the physicality of the character and the voice of the character can be really meaningful and fun parts of the role play part of the game. So going to that example of just someone who's a dragonborn or lizard folk. These are reptilian creatures or humanoids in the game. And so if we're thinking, what does a lizard's face look like? Sometimes those anatomy cues could make us think through how they might sound. I did also talk about like where we get language from, how it develops over time, things that might influence it, but that's again for another workshop. The fun part for today is we can vocalize creatures however we want. But if we are kind of having some fun with the role play, we can say, okay, well, they're a dragonborn. Lizard folk, dragonborn, reptiles. If you think Jurassic Park, do those people usually have really big lips or really thin lips? Do those are creatures, not people, I guess, in those movies. But do they have a lot of teeth? And do they have saliva problems? So every time I think of Jurassic Park, I'm imagining like the very thin-lined lips of velociraptors or T-Rexes and their teeth showing. So if I'm playing a dragonborn, and this is going to be a funny, silly moment. So if I'm playing a dragonborn character, I try and create that physicality with my face. And I usually have some sort of saliva issue. So then I can decide whether this is supposed to be a silly character or a scary character, even if I have those things. So if I want it to be a silly character, I'm going to overemphasize, and I'll demonstrate in a minute. I'm just kind of working myself up to it. But I'm going to overemphasize the silly side of like slurping saliva. Or if I want it to be tough, I might just completely ignore it. In game, like if I'm at the table with players, I may even let saliva just drip from my face, because if I'm that into the character. But so if we've got thin lips, and if you want to practice with me since you're here. Okay, so try and get your lips thin, kind of show your teeth, and it looks a little funny, but that's, you're a lizard folk face, dragonborn face. So then try and say, what did we do yesterday? A rickroll. Like, I'm never going to give you up. So if you do that and you're like, never gonna give you up, and like that's the silly version, and you can just do it with your regular voice. You can also, I always encourage people to have like a kid voice, a grandma voice, and a silly oaf voice. But if you go, never gonna give you up, it's like, well, that sounds a little creepy, but in a silly way. But if you want it to be like a bad guy, and he's like being overly controlling, and the party is gonna ultimately kill him, then it could be a never gonna give you up, and then you get this creepy thing, and you're still getting kind of that airy breathiness of the air flow through the teeth and everything like that, but it's not quite so silly. Now you could always do like a Mickey Mouse to make it silly and like trigger your upper voice. So never gonna give you up, and then now you're picturing a very little version, like maybe that's a little kid, or you give them a lisp. So again, I can go through all different kinds of voices, Elmo and whatnot. Kermit lately has been a very big favorite, but he sort of fits this one because he doesn't have any teeth though. So if you wanted to, you can try and visualize that or physicalize that. But since most of his voice actually happens in the back of the throat, Kermit the Frog, and with the lips, Kermit the Frog here, right? And so never gonna give you up, right? Now it's, if you use his tonalities. So all of that to say, sometimes you can use some of the character choices about physicality to influence the vocalness or how we embody that character. If it's a little kid and it's like, and they're not sure, or if it's supposed to be someone, you can keep those kind of tight-lipped things, but then is it someone who kind of hunches over, who doesn't make eye contact? So we can draw on a lot of traits we know about sociology, psychology, and like nonverbal communication when we're around the table too. So that's why thinking through what your character looks like, and especially since you're going to be describing in a tabletop gaming setting, a lot of what you do is describe your character, or instead of just sharing what their beliefs are, you tell how they act out those beliefs. We can think through all these different elements. So, yeah.
Is nonverbal an option? And like, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah. So you can have, I have had players play mute characters, and then there's also been players who, I haven't ran games like this, but players who are like a whole group of deaf players around the table, and the DM had to learn, chose to learn sign language for this particular group or have an interpreter. And so those are very real possibilities. On Thursday, I'm going to do an advanced DMing where we talk about everything from neurodivergence to having small kids around the table to all kinds of stuff. And that's one of those things that might come up. But if you can play characters who don't speak, and you can decide whether they don't speak for the, the Big Bang Theory reason, like he's nervous around women, so he'll talk normally and then suddenly go silent if there's a woman in the party, in the group, or in the room or whatever, right? And so you kind of see his character arc over time as he gets used to talking around Penny. Pop culture as it is. If you're at the table, so you could have it be where you literally have a dry erase board, and maybe you work it into somebody's magic that they can, maybe it's a wizard, and so, or they get some sort of special item where they have like a tablet that they can write on. And so that player is put in a position where it's going to change the pacing of the game if they want to communicate. Or in the game, in D&D specifically, there are like psychic powers where you can talk to people in their minds. And so you might make it so that if your character does do magic, they do it a different way. And so if you can always have them act like they're basically walking around with a charcoal tablet or slate tablet. You can have them use some sort of sign language. You can also just have them be so nervous that they are used to like pointing, and that's all the communication they'll give. I had one person who wanted to play a character based on something called a mimic. If you're not familiar with D&D, mimics can usually turn into any inanimate object, and they're perceived as that object until someone tries to touch them, and then you stick to them, and then they turn into a monster and eat you. And so one player wanted to be a suit of armor that the helmet was always down on. There was no person inside, but it was just all a mimic. That meant that they couldn't talk because they didn't have language. They couldn't, yeah. And so then they were miming everything. It was like a mimic who grew intelligent enough to actually want to go adventuring for some reason. So yes is the short answer. And there's a variety of ways it can come into play. And then it could become a story plot point for the rest of the party if depending on the why. So if someone doesn't speak because of social anxiety, that's one thing that can develop over time. If someone doesn't speak because they had some sort of violence done to them and their tongue is gone, well, that's a different type of thing. And part of the quest for the first early levels could be going to find a cleric who can heal body parts and heal the tongue back. And so then that can be both really meaningful and powerful. It can also end up silly depending on how that person decides to voice. Like the whole time they're playing, like they're acting really serious, and them with doing kind of the nonverbal cues sound makes them really tough. Then they finally get there and they've got like a Mike Tyson voice. Like players could do that. It could also be if they've got some sort of magical curse on them, then the party has to go find a way to break the curse. And so you can use those sorts of things as plot points. If you're playing it as a character, I probably wouldn't recommend it in planning on doing it for a long campaign, but it just because it changes the pacing of the game. But you can. Other follow-up questions? I'm hyperverbal processing, sorry.
I have another very niche question.
Sure.
Language. So different races of people. Is language a barrier within a party? And then could you have an in-party language so that if you're encountering a stranger or an enemy, you have like a language internally you can speak that can't be like interpreted by the other person?
Yes. So in the game, different races or species do have their own languages, and it is possible like different classes are able to speak different languages. So regular languages, they have something called common, which would be whatever the main language is, and so of the group. So it's just a way of not making English be a language, honestly. Or if you're in France,
The common tongue.
yes, the common tongue. So lingua franca or whatnot. So you've got common, which most people speak. Then you've got goblin, giant, elvish, draconic, and a number of other ones. So each there's aquatic or aquan, and so depending on different regions, people might have it. And then people could just make up a language for a particular world that they're playing in. But if people, you can get that in party communication where people do speak a different language. Their characters speak, two of them speak the same language, and some people don't. So then it becomes we can make it fun, making fun of you behind your back, or we're talking about how pretty you are. I'm thinking of an example my mom had. She used to hang out with when she was in college. She got mad at she got mad at some friends because they were speaking in Italian around her, and one of them was basically saying she was really pretty, but she didn't know Italian, so she got all upset. Like, that's rude. And then alternatively, when I worked at McDonald's as a manager, it was not uncommon when they thought I didn't speak Spanish for me to hear insults about me, and I just go "pero por qué" as I walked by, which is me, but on a number of levels. But yeah, so language is absolutely something that in game can be used either to connect or to create separation, just like in the real world. It is a great role play option, and I did live stream the workshop yesterday, where I'm giving like the crash course in linguistics and trying to talk through how that comes through in play. But some of the short things are if you've got a character who is the only one who speaks the language of some random person you find in the forest, well, that gives them a reason to connect. And so if I'm running a game, I might try and do that on purpose. I might try and put a non-player character that can connect with a player who's not been engaged as much, because then they're forced to be the communicator. And so that can be a fun way to draw out quieter players without necessarily putting them on the spot, but because they're having to do this constant translation. And sometimes that, if you're trying to do in-game different languages, it means that sometimes you're having individual text message conversations as the person running the game or between the players, and then they're saying it in character or responding to it in character. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's good. Okay.
Thank you.
There are a lot of different ways it can show up, and so it's so much fun to think. Sometimes you can signal with an accent your social or economic status, kind of like we would think of like how Cockney or kind of a country like Texas accent has a little more drawn out or cut off words. If you include a version of like ain't, or if you use the non-academic term versus, if someone's like, let's have a cheese snack, and you think Cheez-Its, but they're thinking Gruyere or whatever, those signal different backgrounds a little bit, or different life experiences. So even that technically counts as a language. That would be like a semantics or the web of word meanings, right? Yeah. So other questions? You're asking really good questions. So do you have thoughts? What does this make you think about?
I haven't met him once,
Okay.
but I'm just thinking how to be a better role player character,
Yeah.
and then also like how the DM should also play into that, like you said,
Mhm.
making that connection, throwing in inside characters. So we have to kind of try to navigate that. So every player has we're all new pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and that can be both really good and really challenging. If everyone's at the same level, then everyone's kind of held to a low accountability. But if you have someone who's trying to run a game and they're not used to some of like managing the social dynamics, either a player who's really talkative or a player who's really quiet, or players who are really violent and players who like to role play, and have kind of the let's not kill everybody moments. Yeah, so that can be a challenge. So I like to, for context, I guess, because have you played tabletop gaming before?
Mhm.
Okay, and this is you're newer to it, though, you said. So just to frame tabletop gaming, I like to say, the reason I like tabletop gaming, and I kind of have coined this phrase, is it's not whether you win or lose. It's not a competitive game. It's collaborative storytelling. So it really doesn't, you can do, like, people will build their characters like for them to maximize wins in the game, but D&D isn't really about that. Like, people, we want to win, we want to beat the bad guy, or whatever. Sometimes people just want to be the bad guy. That's a whole other thing. But it's a collaborative storytelling game isn't competitive with the people at the table. And so what that means is it's not so much whether you win or lose the game, it's how epically you succeed or fail. And so when that happens, that means that the point of the game is to tell stories together. And so that collaborative emphasis is has to be kind of, sometimes it has to be culture set around by making sure that everybody's getting a moment. And so in my DMing workshops, one of the things I encourage is reminding players, reminding the DM that their job is to advocate for all the players. It's the players' jobs to advocate for their characters and the other players. And so that means that when they're around the table, if you've got a really talkative player, the DM has the job of shifting focus if they're talking too much and drawing out the other players, like advocating for the quiet player. And then the quiet player should take on the responsibility of advocating for their character, because every character, no matter how big or small, is the hero of their own story, kind of using that classic line. And so some of that dynamic, you can let, if people are patient, you can kind of let a person have their extended moment, as long as it's not always their extended moments. And so sometimes if you're in a player role, it's advocating for the other players, like specifically in character, asking and drawing out something you know from one of the other players, especially the quieter ones. So yeah, and that could be by using some of these. I know what they've shown, that their behavior in game has shown that their character hates, adores, or the people they trust. Or if they're the people you trust, if that character is one that your character trusts, you can go and have like a whispered conversation, but like draw the focus of the table to that whispered conversation. If the other person who's quiet is a character you don't know if you trust, or they align more with someone or something that you hate, that can be a reason to like get the table fired up in game, and draw out that character and get them to kind of lean into those things, and have that tension, that fun tension at the table that isn't player versus player, but character to character. Yeah, makes sense. How am I doing on time? Plenty of time. So did I have anything else on the sheet? Artifacts. Oh, I did some of the fun things when we're thinking about, so we've got our physical description, we've got our language background, we also have any artifacts or clothing, anything that could signal culture or identity can be a meaningful moment of the game. And a lot of times, you'll, as a game runner, as a game master, I'll seed different things and see what players respond to. But when you're developing characters, I just randomly walked and found this body adornment, encyclopedia of body adornment, like on the shelf, and grabbed it. I'm a terrible person because I didn't check it out. I just took it off the shelf. Mm-hmm. I know where it goes though. But this encyclopedia talks about everything from identifying tattoos, clothing, piercings. The D&D Club did an interview with two of our anthropology professors who teach the bones, stones, and death and dying across cultures and forensic anthropology. And so we had a conversation and live streamed it a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about cultural practices connected to skeletal work. And so a millennia or two ago, there were tribes who would intentionally like bind the skulls of usually female babies, so that they would have these elongated skulls. And that was a beautification modification. Alternatively, there are some cultures that would file down teeth to points for women so that they would appear more beautiful by some value that that culture had. And so if I was thinking about that, and it's like that can signal a lot of things depending on whether someone has insight into the culture or whether someone's heard of that practice before. Or it can be a great way to create misunderstanding in a game and have the players have to resolve that in character. So if one of the main bad guys in early levels are goblins, well, they're supposed to be sharp teeth, little green folk with floppy ears and bad hygiene. So If the reason, though, that goblins have sharp teeth is because, so if an adventurer sees a group of goblins and half of them have sharp teeth traveling through the forest, and that's all the description they get, they may assume that it's because they're violent, they're cannibals, something like that. But if they take time to kind of lean into the character, that could mean that the goblins actually are just trying to look pretty. It's their version of makeup or dyeing their hair or getting their nails done, right? And so create some tension for potential misunderstanding. And then I'll talk about this more in my afternoon session on empathy, but things like this allow us to engage in empathetic thinking toward things that are unfamiliar. And in that disassociated state a little bit. I'm not sure if that's the psychologically appropriate term to use, but it's a layer apart, a layer separate. So we can think about things like, does my character have a specific style? Do they have specific adornments that link to their culture or identity? Where do I get that from? As a player, should I be careful about where I draw influence from? Right? Tribals are really big, but if you don't know what they mean, or if it's like the classic, like I'm going to use a symbol from an Asian language because it looks cool, but it actually means something terrible, right? Someone told me it means power and it actually means nerd. I'm not saying those things aren't synonymous, but I want to make sure I know what it is. Yeah. So for your character that you're playing, what's the character you're playing right now? Okay, it's been months. Okay, do you remember any details about them?
That they are trying to find a lost item, like a family heirloom.
Okay, so family heirloom definitely aligns with this sense of art. There's an artifact, and why, right? It's got that gives motivation, right? If you're like, I had this trinket once and I lost it and I want it back. It's like, well, that might be how you tell a stranger. So if you're trying to like keep them aloof, like, oh, I'm just looking for this. I heard about this cool item, right? And, well, that's not going to give a stranger any clues into who you are. But then over time, maybe you reveal that it's a family heirloom in game to someone close to you, right? We find out the backstory a little bit naturally through those side conversations. And as we do, the weight of your personal mission or goal becomes a promise that we want to see fulfilled as an audience. So other people around the table, if it's a D&D session, or if we see that happen in a movie or some other story, like it adds weight to that experience, and now we want to see you succeed. Or if you're a terrible person, we want to see you fail. Or we hope that finding it will bring some sort of closure in your life that helps you heal. So those sorts of things, those focal points of your character can, in artifact form, can become either identifiers or ways to establish some sort of character promise or character trajectory that we get to enjoy the growth of. Do you remember any sort of race, class, or anything like that?
It's because we did a one-shot, so and then they're very similar of the two, so I would have to look.
Okay, cool. Well, here, since you're here, I'll give you a copy of the handout, and I'll also the next thing I do here. And then I also, I use this to help people make decisions about D&D stuff. So the next part of this is when we've put on the hat of this particular character, we've decided who or what they hate and why, who or what they adore and why, who they trust and why. We've thought about what they look like, we've thought about what they sound like, what artifacts they may have. Some of that may happen at the same time that we're making decisions about what class they play. And class is a term that needs clarification because we're used to thinking like socioeconomic class, like upper, mid, or lower. But class in tabletop gaming means like your profession or the thing you level up in. And so it could be a fighter, a wizard, a sorcerer, a monk, a bard, any of those things that are standard in the game set. And each of those have their little idiosyncrasies. So when trying to decide what class people want to play, I usually ask them, well, do you want magic? Do you want sparkly lightning and stuff coming, and energy coming from your fingers? Or are you wanting to go whack, whack, thump, thump, smash, smash, right? And so that's a place to start. And so that's where you get what I gave you guys, which is the decision tree. So the top one, I think, is the magic choices. What type of magic? And I had someone ask, what's arcane? Arcane is like is the type of magic that is usually book learned. What are the others? What's the actual question at the top there?
Arcane, divine, or
Arcane, divine, or natural magic. So arcane means I'm getting it from wizard brained learning. Like I've memorized a certain process, almost like a doctor would, but with in D&D it's the weave of magic. Then there are arcane can also mean like influenced by other sources. Then we have divine, which has to do with like, so that might be sorcerer or warlock, where you have some endowment of magic from another thing. And then divine or natural could be like from a specific god or deity, or drawing from nature like a druid would, or the life forces around you. And so thinking through if you were wanting sparks to shoot out of your fingers or something like that, or healing energy, something you want to be able to mold the forces of nature versus smash your way through an army, you can decide a couple different ways. And there are classes that bridge the gap, like bards, or you can get rogues who have like an arcane trickster side to them. But that's again after we put our hat on. What does it make you think about?
That I try to avoid magic because after magic, and there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, my wife, I was surprised. My wife ended up just wanting to be someone who can club people in the head the first time she, or like that's her go-to. Like, I just want to be someone who can step in, hit really hard, doesn't say much. And so, yeah, it was surprising. I'm like, okay, well, all right.
Is she a not physically imposing person in real life?
No, I mean, she's 5'6", which is, and you know, she's not physically imposing.
Yeah.
She's somewhere in the middle, I guess. I'm not afraid of her per se, in most contexts. She's got a mama bear mode, and I think that's what she ends up leaning into with the role play. So yeah. But yeah, so sometimes thinking about the overall party. Do you have thoughts? I know you've sat in on a couple of our sessions, but you're just kind of taking this in. Okay. What do these questions make you think
How
about?
is bard magic? I thought bard was.
So a bard uses song to cast spells. So a bard is usually somewhere in the middle. So there's a blend. They're sometimes called what's called a half caster, which means that they have some physical capability and they have some magical capability. So for instance, I had a bard I played. My first character was a bard. It was a halfling. And his backstory was that his mom was sick. He started learning a little magic from a gnome neighbor down the street, and but really liked singing to his mom. It was just something that they had as a tradition. So to comfort her, he would go in and sing. And he eventually discovered that he had the power of magic through music by singing to his mom, and she got better. Like, magical healing was released. And so when he introduces himself, voice actor moment incoming. Canto reed whistle at your service. Just wanted to spread a little light and love in the world through the music and the magic. And he literally is like a little leprechaun. But that was one of my first characters. But he also, so he could use magic, but he also was very fast, and he would go in and he could do like short sword dagger type attacks. So he'd get in, stealth in, and then he'd whack people really quick and then get out. Because that's something halflings are light of foot, much like in the Hobbit. So yeah, so there are a couple people who are half casters. Rangers are like that too. They can do some nature magic like a druid, but they're also known for their ability with a bow, or sometimes just their desire to not be around people, but to like nature better, that kind of thing.
I just want to have a starter kit, a D&D starter kit.
Yeah.
So like my husband and I are like, it's just sitting there collecting dust. Like, how do we like find a third?
So if you want, we've arranged community hangouts. Like, I have a friend who said I like that I run a game with, or for their whole family. They're like, can you come run a game with us? I'm like, sure. And then every time I go, they find some way to like sneak $100 into my backpack. But anyway, she's like, okay, my birthday's coming up. Actually, she didn't tell me that part. She said, I want to do a block party and get like my whole neighborhood of like 25 people doing D&D for a couple hours. And I'm like, I think we could get some DMs for you. And so we arranged for 4 or 5 of for myself and 4 or 5 of our people who have been trained in game mastering to go and do like this block party event outside with like 5 tables and all of our neighbors. So all that to say, if you wanted to, we could probably try and find one. Or you, if you wanted, you and your husband could just come to the club on Monday or Thursday night and jump in on one of the games and see how it feels. Or you could post in the esports Discord in the D&D thing and say, I need a DM who wants to come hang out. I'll provide snacks and see if you have any takers.
You said you're doing a session that includes like neurodivergence and children. People with children.
Yes. Yeah, so I've run games for 3 to 63 age range. So my youngest daughter, I started with all 3 of my daughters in a family campaign running games. And so when my daughters were 3.5, 6, and 8, and my once 8-year-old is over there selling art and is a concurrent enrolled student here now at 15.5. But one of the first sessions my youngest daughter had at 3.5. We let her kind of be the sidekick of her sister. So she came in as like a giant spider that was like baby giant spider. So she was like a dog-sized spider. And we're like, so then when we got into her first situation to make a decision was, okay, so there are some unfamiliar people who show up in the middle of the road in front of you. You're a baby giant spider. Do you want to shoot web because you can do that? Do you want to run up and bite them, or do you want to go climb up a tree and hide? And she's like, no, I want to say, and I can't remember what she said, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, what does that sound like as a spider? And she goes, so yeah. So yes, we'll talk about that with young players. If you want to draw in kids, sometimes it has to do with just making sure the content is something they're comfortable with. Like when my now 10-year-old had her first character death at 9 years old, that was a meaningful family conversation about death and dying. And so, thinking through that a little bit. But also, like with younger players or with players who are new to the game, it's about giving them very straightforward choices, almost like a contractor with paint colors. It's like you don't give them the whole 16-page color booklet. You give them 3 or 4 that you think you're sure they'll like. And then if they decide they want something more, it gets the conversation going. And since it's about collaborative storytelling, you work in anytime you've got a game with any player, if the goal is that everyone has fun together telling the story, you lean into the things they care about or that is aligned, like that everybody at the table can enjoy. So even if you have someone at the table who likes NC-17 movies, if for whatever reason, if the rest of the table is at like a PG-13 or PG zone, they're going to have to pull back on that to make sure that the fun around the table is maintained. And so if they do something that is borderline, it's like it's a fade to black moment. And so it's those sorts of complexities that are really getting into the nitty gritty of specific player challenges. That's that. And then, having someone who's got ADHD or autism at the table, you engage with them differently. And so for me, when I'm running that workshop, I'm drawing on my experiences and training from teaching and things like that. And that helps. Yeah. So that was more than the question you asked. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's fine.
I'm always self-conscious. So if you were going to create a character, if you were going to follow this like hat model, what are some of the things you might think of?
Like I don't know enough to make my decision. Like, is there like a class of people that I hate?
So you could say,
am I a paladin who hates clerics? I don't like, why would that happen?
So okay, so could be. And if you don't know do you know the difference between paladin and cleric?
I know that one's a healer and one is a holy.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
good. Yeah. So it's like, if you think of the way like a beat cop might treat a detective and vice versa, like they have different roles in the organization. And so it's like detective, or like if you watch a crime show and it's like FBI has jurisdiction versus like local police, like that could be like paladin versus cleric. It's like, well, they're the softies that stay in the back of the battle healing people, and the paladin. And so it could be something. And if you don't know, but you make the decision, you can, as the game unfolds, go, wait, they're a cleric? oh, and like when you realize it, you're like, as you realize what a cleric is, suddenly you named that for your character not knowing, and then whatever it was, now you have to engage with it. So if your paladin goes in and it's like, I hate clerics, and that's what you come up with, and you're not sure why, the second you run into a cleric, you get to decide what about that person or that cleric bugs you, and now it's all clerics.
Great.
So part of this is like, one, you're not beholden to any of these questions. They're starters. There's not a wrong answer when it comes to role playing a character. You could literally choose anything. It is the goal is to get it to create something that your character, for the sake of meaningful storytelling, is triggered to respond to. And so that's really why those questions. Yeah.
If one shot is usually get it done in one sitting. And so what's like the flexibility there? Like, is there like a forever campaign or like one that's only 4 weeks? If the DM can make it
whatever people are willing and able to show up. I think there's a Reddit post on the internet about a guy who's had a game running for 30 years. And that's like the longest running game. Like I've run 5-minute games. Like I could hand you a dice and we could play right now, and we would make up the character as we went. I've also, so one shots are usually anywhere from 1 hour to 4 hours, and you know that you're going to try and end some piece of the story. It's a single episode or single movie, and so a lot of the things are fast and bigger. Whereas like if I'm stepping in and I know this group has agreed to like show up every day, every week on Thursday or something, well, I'm going to take every story moment slowly. And I'm notorious, like it's bad because a unique thing about my DMing is like I can Tolkien things. I read Lord of the Rings 7 times before I was 13, or by the time I was 13. So some of my games, we will spend 3 hours sneaking around a troll. But the players, like I'm keeping the stakes high and I'm engaging them in more description or like adding little, I'm seeding things along the way, and they're trying to solve the next problem that shows up. And so some games can feel like that, where you're like, really? We spent 3 hours and all we did was travel 50 feet to avoid the snoring troll baby. And then we ended up waking it up and having to run at the end anyways. So that's what it can feel like. But if everybody's having fun, you can tell that story. Alternatively, a one shot, if I've got 3 hours, it's like, how fast can we destroy or save a kingdom? And it's like Avengers speed, right? So yeah. Full range, if you're like, I can get 4 people to sit down for 2 hours and that's it, and they're done. That's like the Christmas one shot you do with your family, because you're like, I want you to try this game, and they're like, or it's your birthday, I want you to try this one thing, like just do it one day, and then and so there are ways to make those engagements with new players go more smoothly and kind of keep them engaged. But yeah, there's a lot of variety. Who is it? Critical Role is one of the most well-known D&D groups, and their game master did a one-shot, or he does a one-shot periodically for Christmas with one of the late night guys, Stephen Colbert, who also is a big Tolkien fan. But he's done for charity 1.5 hour game with one of the best known D&D players. And so I think one year he's got like a little, it's just him and the DM sitting across a table, and he gets like a little bumblebee helper or something that can go sting people or like scout out things. And so yeah, so you can have a lot of times the standard group or the standard session is 2 to 3 hours and 4 people. It's not if you have to, you can play one-on-one. So sometimes couples will be like, okay, you're running the game and I'm playing, and then you do the NPCs and I'll do mine. And then sometimes it's one of those where there are ways you can play where it's like everything is generated on the fly, and as long as everybody around the table is comfortable with how the game's being played, it's good. So that's where you get a lot of that kind of social negotiation of what's going to make it fun for us. So, yeah.
We got her a book. It's like a comic book for like a choose your own adventure thing. And so she like started on this page, and there's like a door over here with a symbol on it. fireplace over here, like there's something in it, and so she would choose the symbol and go to that page. She was very into it.
Yeah.
I think she'd be interested.
Choose Your Own Adventures are basically one player D&D without dice. So where's the fun? So and so yeah, Choose Your Own Adventures. If someone's are enjoying that, like D&D is group Choose Your Own Adventure. Unless you have someone who's just like really shoving the party in a very specific direction called railroading, and even then it's still kind of you can derail very quickly. But yeah. So if you've got people who like stories, and kind of like hanging out or need some social interaction, or you want to draw the family to the table again, but everybody's bored with Catan or whatever.
Catan is bad in my household.
Is
My
it?
husband's a nightmare of a negotiator. This isn't even fun anymore.
It's like Monopoly. It becomes a divorce game.
Yes. We don't play Catan.
So yeah. And so the big thing is like if you're starting a game, like low pressure on DMs. And I do like if you go to the channel, if you go to the YouTube channel, like I've got materials, like I live streamed my workshops yesterday about running the game. I'll live stream the ones coming up this week. I have other things, and there are cool people online who've done it better than me anyways. But the important rule or guideline or mentality that you want to have, if you've never done this before, it's just like any other game. Like nobody wants to read 4 hours of rules ahead of time. Like, you don't start, like some people want to read the whole Catan booklet before they start. And then others are like, what's the first turn? And then you do the first turn. So as long as everyone around the table is having fun and they sort of have a built-in logic that everybody is comfortable with for why the roles are being done, like decided or described the way they are, then everything's good. So you could do D&D with no rules, and make it up together as you go, as long as everybody's negotiating and enjoying that part. And so if you don't know the rules and nobody else does either, and you're like, that sounds like something an insight check would be, then you do an insight check and it's like, oh, well, you rolled high. Good job. I think you figured out they're lying, and if everybody's cool with that. And even if you did the wrong check, that'd be fine too. So yeah. Yeah.
So there's a subsection on the Discord server for tabletop. I should message there.
Yeah, so if you're in esports, if you go into the CGC esports, you have to self-enroll in the D&D section. Yeah. And so we realized it was easier than me maintaining a whole Discord or having one of the kind of the students maintain a Discord. We'll go with esports. And so we're under their umbrella. It made for a good partnership, especially last year. And as we grew into the new esports, Mikey, the new esports guy. So, yeah. But yeah, we probably have anywhere from 40 people, somewhere around 40 people. We usually get 2 nighttime, like Monday, Thursday, 5 to 8:30 is when our normal club meetings are. And we usually have anywhere from 18 to 27 or 15 to 30 people each night. And 8 to 12 people could show up a couple hours early and play a tabletop gaming, a card game called Magic the Gathering. So, yeah. But so you're always welcome to jump into the Discord. I have my email and kind of my business cell number, like student cell number, on my YouTube channel, which is where the streaming is. And so you can always send me an email with questions, or if you can't find a DM, that's always an option. Yeah. But since I think that's all the time I have. You have handouts you can keep, and so yeah, I can't remember what's next though. What up, Tyler? Stop streaming.